welcome to another Front Porch Conversation. We're happy that you're joining us today, and we have a little bit of bird sounds in the background and maybe even a little construction, so progress is in the air. Now I'd like to introduce you to Dick McClaine, our guest today. Dick, thank you. Welcome.
I thank you for inviting me to take part in this, and I'll try to make it brief as my life of 86 years can do. But
well, we might have to have 2 or 3 episodes. Dick, why don't you share with us where you were born and grew up?
Okay, I was born in New York, and during the Depression, the mid-Depression, 1934, and my dad and mother were down there for to find work, and moved back to Maine when I was about 6 months old, and lived in Maine throughout my growing up years.
Whereabouts in Maine? In
the Lincolnville, Camden, Rockport, and Rockland area on the coast, eastern coastal section of Maine. And so I consider myself a Maine native, even though I wouldn't claim New York anyway now. But anyway, that's where I grew up.
And what are some of your fondest childhood memories?
Well, my memory of childhood and anything back that far is kind of dim, but the 3 things that I could think of. One was the icy waters in the summer, swimming off the coast of Maine and off the big granite rocks along the coast. Tramping hay in the summertime. I lived on a farm with my grandparents during the war years, and
now you call that tramping hay?
Tramping hay.
Tell us what that means.
Well, it's a process where my granddad used horses, and he'd take the horse wagon out in the field, and they'd pitch the hay on the wagon, and a bunch of kids would get on it and tramp it down to pack it down, so it would be like a bale of hay, only it would be a whole wagon load. And then you take it into the barn, and they had a big fork that came out from a rafter in an opening usually over the barn door, and then push that into the hay and lock it, and then the horses would pull a line out, and that would lift the hay up, go inside and release, and then would tramp it up in the haymow. So that was kind of fun. And the only other thing that I can really remember from my childhood years was my dad used to cut wood during the war years, early 40s, and I'd go out in the woods with him in the winter time, and we'd take a lunch out, and I'd just play around in the ice and snow, and he'd chop wood, and then we'd build fire and have our lunch, whatever it was, sandwich or whatever. And so that's pretty much what I can remember. I know there were a lot of things that I could probably tell you, but
do you have siblings, or did you have siblings?
No, I was one of a kind.
Me too. See, I always find something in common with people, or try to.
There you go.
And after you graduated from high school?
I graduated from high school, from Rockland High School in 1952, and had about a year and a half, 3 semesters at the University of Maine in Orono, and was studying mechanical engineering, but I'm not sure that I really was cut out to be a college student at that time. So after about a year and a half, I was having trouble with calculus and things like that. And during the course of being at the University of Maine, the first year and a half, a friend of mine and I went and joined the Air National Guard in Bangor, and just became an airman basic. And then they opened up the aviation cadet program to become a flying officer in the Air Force, and I applied for that. And in 1954, early part of 54, my dad passed away, but that was when I had finished my time, my 3rd semester, and I wasn't going back to college again. So I went into the aviation cadet program, went through that. That took you from being a civilian to an officer and a gentleman, more or less. And I went to Lackland Air Force Base for my basic and officer training and pre-flight training. And spent 2 months there in 54, April to June of 54. Then I went over to Ellington Air Force Base at Houston, Texas, and took my navigator training, flight training and ground school and all of that. That lasted a year. And after that, I spent 20 years in the Air Force, traveling around, and my first assignment was back in Bangor, Maine, where I had started out with the Air National Guard and spent 4 years there, and then went to California. I was an air tanker navigator, air refueling navigator training, and it was an enjoyable career. I enjoyed it and spent 20 years doing that, and retired at Pease Air Force Base in 1974, the 1st of August of 74, after 20 plus years of the Air Force. We were living in Elliott, Maine at that time. Are you familiar with Maine at all?
Yes, well, the Rockland area.
Yeah.
Bar Harbor.
But Elliott was right across the river from Portsmouth.
Okay.
And right across the river from the Air Force Base. So we lived in Elliott. We bought a place there, a little 21-acre farm, and lived there. And in the course of living there for 6 or 7 years, we started going to the Elliott Advent Christian Church. And Pastor Frank Lupo, Patty's husband, and everybody I think knows the former Patty Lupo.
Right.
I can't remember what her last, Williamson is it, or something like that.
No, but I'll tell you shortly when I remember.
But anyway, that's how we came to know the Lord. My wife and I. She was, I think she had been born again before, but
Tell us where you met your wife and when.
Okay, I met her in Bangor, Maine. She was a nursing student at the Eastern Maine General Hospital in Bangor, and I was out there stationed at Dow, and we met and got married there in Caribou. She was a Caribou native, way up north, northern Maine, and I lost her in 2017. But we'd had 58 years of a good life together. So.
And you have a daughter, at least one daughter?
I have 2 daughters. Stephanie lives down in Melbourne. She's a librarian. And the other daughter, Lori, she's a registered nurse, and she moved up here shortly before her mom died to help take care of her. And since her mom passed, she has stayed here with me and being my caregiver, and I'm her caregiver, and we just put puzzles together and have all sorts of fun.
When you talked about joining the Advent Christian Church in Elliott City, Elliott, right?
Elliott,
Tell us, what was that experience like?
Well, as I mentioned, my wife believes that she knew the Lord before that. I went to church. My background, my family background, my mother in particular, more or less grew up as a Christian Scientist. So I went to church once in a while with her, but I really didn't have any idea of what a salvation experience was, or who the Lord was and what he did and things like that. So that was really my first experience. And they had an altar call, and I went up front one day, and then my wife could say, well, now you don't have to say that now you know what it is. So it's been a good road, and living in Maine there and going to that church, and we lived there about Elliott about 71, about 6 or 7 years, and the church, Warren Connery was our pastor, and he's still up in the area somewhere, but he was our young pastor right out of Berkshire, and convinced me that I ought to go to Bible college. So packed up and left Maine and went to Berkshire for a couple of years, along with my 2 daughters at the same time. So that was a kind of an experience, but it worked out well. I'm glad that I went there. I got, after 2 years, I was having a few troubles with Greek, and I wasn't really. I didn't have the feeling that I should be a pastor. I don't regret the knowledge that I learned in the school and the academics. So after 2 years, that would have been in the spring of 1980, they called for they were looking for cottage parents here at the village.
For the children's program, is that right?
So and the reason we had done that is because we were familiar with the village. We had, both my wife and I had served as chaperones on a bus trip, one of their spring trips, bringing college kids down from Berkshire to do work here for a week, and we got to know the village and the people and things like that. So we took that position, but at the time we had a son who was about 10 years old, 11 years old, and it didn't work out with him. Living in a cottage and having the local kids there, the ones that there were conflicts here that it didn't work out. So we spent one school year here, and then we moved on down to Vero Beach, and I went to work down there in a Christian camp.
And how long did you do that?
Worked at the camp. It was the Life for Youth Ranch in Vero Beach, and it worked there about 4 or 5 years. That brought me up to about 1985. During one thing I neglected to tell you, my education. I mentioned the University of Maine, and then all of my academics in the cadet training, aviation cadet navigator schools. And I had the opportunity in 1964 to go back to college, to what they call the bootstrap program. Have you ever heard of General Curtis LeMay?
No.
He was the leader of the Strategic Air Command, the bomber commands, and he was a real pusher for people to have a college degree, all of his officer people to have a college degree. So I went back to University of Omaha and did that for about 6 months and got my degree. So I'm a college graduate for what it's worth.
Congratulations. You have a very well-rounded education, not only by topic, but by location. So.
Yeah. So.
Now, did the Air Force ever send you overseas?
I had, yes. Let's see. I had several assignments here in the States. Like I mentioned, Bangor, Maine was the first one. Went out to Beale Air Force Base in Northern California and spent about 6 or 7 years out there. Then we had upgraded from the KC-97 tanker, which was a propeller-driven aircraft, 4 engines, to the KC-135, which was a jet-propelled, similar to the 707, the airliner back in the the 50s and 60s and 70s. And spent about 6 years there, and then I went to Air Intelligence Training School in Lowry, Air Force Base, Colorado, and was an air intelligence officer for 5 years of my 20-year career. And in the course of doing that, I had the opportunity to go to Vietnam. When I came out of the school, I was programmed to go to Tan Son Nhut in Saigon, Vietnam. That was in the late 69, 67, 68. And just before I got ready to leave my training there at Lowry, orders came through to go to Texas. And I went there to an air reconnaissance, RF-4C reconnaissance wing. And I spent 6 months there, and about 6 months after being there, an order came through that they needed someone in Thailand in the headquarters staff intelligence officer position. So I jumped on it because I knew that next time I would be back in Vietnam somewhere.
Be in line for Vietnam.
So I spent a year in Thailand and came back and went back through the KC-135 training, which was required after 5 years of being off a flight crew. In the early part, I mentioned I was in reciprocating engine, KC-97s, and we had to go to California but we had a 3-month school there for upgrading to the jet type of air refueling and the altitude differences and things like that. But after 5 years of being out of a flight crew, I was during a 5-year period of being a staff officer. I had to get back through that school, so I came back and went through that school once again. And then my last assignment in KC-135s as a navigator was at Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire. That's how we ended up being at Pease when I retired and living in Elliott and going to the Advent Christian Church there at Elliott. I failed to mention that you asked about the kids. We did have a son. We adopted him in Hawaii, and unfortunately we lost him in 2003 because of health issues. But as I mentioned earlier too, that it didn't work out with him when we were living here. So that's one of those things. But right. We miss him a lot, but that's part of the experience of life, I guess. And,
it is. And what about grandchildren?
Grandchildren, got, let's double check here, got 7 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren.
Well, congratulations. Any of them close by? Of the
one of them is works for Reformed University Fellowship, one of the girls. She's 25. She's out at the University of Oklahoma. She's been an intern out there for working on her 3rd year. And one of them lives in over in the Tampa area. One is out in Portland, Oregon. And then the others, I think, pretty much are in the Melbourne, Palm Bay area. So let's see. I better think about that. I don't want to shortchange anybody. But anyway, I think that's I think that's fine.
You and your wife were living in Melbourne, and
we were living in Sebastian.
Oh, Sebastian. Okay. And how long were you there?
We moved there, and we had 2 times in I said we went to Vero Beach from the village here, and I worked down there, and we lived there until 1995, 96 in Vero Beach. And then I decided that it was time to retire. I decided. And we moved to North Carolina. Moved out to near the Great Smoky Mountains. We're right on the edge of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and living on Deep Creek. And I spent 4 years there. And then it became a 12 or 13-hour drive back and forth to see the kids as they were growing. So we trucked back down to Central Florida, but we ended up in Sebastian rather than Vero Beach, which is a little bit closer to Melbourne. So that's why we were in Sebastian when we left to come up here. You
what year did you move to the village?
We moved here in 2015, so we've been here a little over five years.
And so did you always think you would retire here?
We had thought about it for years. We'd come back every 2 or 3 years and visit and see what was going on and note the changes. And it changed a lot over that 30 years or so that we were gone, 35 years that we were gone from actually physically living here for a year. So and I'm glad we did. It's a nice little retirement community, and can't beat the people, and it's just a nice environment to spend your final years in, and I plan on doing that.
And you live in Taylor Commons, is that right?
Live in Taylor Commons, McGranahan Place, right across the street from the bank. I always watch what's going on. Haven't had a bank robbery yet, but
I bet we're all thankful for that.
I
am. Why don't you share with us some of the things you've been doing during the pandemic, and as well as volunteering at the village?
Well, my volunteer services have been at the Twice Nice Furniture. I was working up there for 2 days a week for the past couple of years until Mr. COVID came by. And I was also helping on Sundays down at the Good Sam, helping out Pastor Jack set up the church service there in one of the dining rooms. And then I took over when Pastor Bruce moved in. And then when the COVID came, that's been shut down. So I hope that we'll be back to both of those types of activities soon, but I never know. But
you brought something for show and tell today.
Yes, my show and tell project here. During the holiday, COVID holiday, I like art, and I've got involved in the Swanee River Studio, and I've done a lot of painting of lighthouses and things like that. But during the past 6 months or so, I have taking scraps out of the trash can and building lighthouses. And this is just one of my lighthouses that I have put together, made out of Slim Fast bottles. Got a little tea light in the top there. This top part, the glass part of the lighthouse, is basically what had been a medicine bottle. And then the other stuff, my daughter Lori, that is my caregiver, goes around and she found some rocks and some old burls of trees, and I put them all together and built myself a little lighthouse.
Would you turn that a little more to the camera? I want them to see the stairs as well. I thought that was really...
And the stairs are made out of wire and toothpicks, cross members or toothpicks. And this is just fine wire that you can buy in the hardware store. A little bit of plywood that comes from the Lowe's. Little stand there made out of toothpicks and wire. But it's fun. It's used up a lot of my time. It kept me busy, and I have a total of 12.
I actually was recently at the library and saw the display you had, and until we talked, I thought they were all, you'd done all the wood carving and created them, but this is even very ingenious. And things you had on hand. For the most part.
It's just things that would have been thrown away normally. I spent very little on materials, wire and toothpicks, not too much. And that's just paper. Make the top out of heavy poster board and cut it and glue it together. So it's fun. And I have a total of 12 now, and I've got a couple of taller ones that wouldn't fit in the library display case, so I've left those home. But and this is another one that was just a tad too tall to go in the library case. But
and also at the library, there's a collection of lighthouses,
yes,
painted lighthouses.
Yeah.
That you've done some of those as well.
I did all of those. That's the 7 of the 12 that I have.
Now I was talking about the paintings.
Oh, the paintings, yes. Yeah. We just put up a new display down there, and there are, I think there are 16 paintings. Both the Artists Guild and the Swanee River Studio folks are combining this time to put up paintings, and the theme was basically lighthouses and things like that. So but it's fun. I enjoy it. It uses up some of my time and gets your mind off the troubles of the world, and it's good. It's relaxing. I enjoy it.
I was in the library yesterday, and I thought, I'm just taking a little mini vacation, going to lighthouses, sitting here looking at all those. It was fun. Do you have things on your bucket list you'd like to accomplish?
I guess just to live a good, long, productive life. I don't know. I would like to go back up to Maine again, just to see what it's like up there, but it's just a long ways to go, and maybe one day I'll get up the courage to get on a train or bus and go on one of those tours that they have. But other than that, I'm content to stay right here. I can't think of much else that I would really have a great desire to do.
What advice would you give a young person today?
I think the advice that everybody should have is to find the Lord. Let the Lord find you, and accept the free gift of salvation that He has for you, and then to the best of your ability, with God's help, live out that life of love and grace and mercy that He provides to us in return to our fellow man, and then just look forward to the eternal home that we're all going to have some point in time.
Like you said, that's wonderful advice for anybody.
It is. It is.
It's the true message.
Yeah. Yeah, there are so many messages out there now for young people to look at. And as far as it goes with the young people nowadays, the Lord really is the only answer that they have. The only answer that anybody has, really. But there's so much trash on the little prompters that we have nowadays that go in our pockets that continually keep us occupied, that we know our focus is totally off of anything that's lasting. And if they can come in an early age to a knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ and accept Him as their personal guide throughout the rest of their lives, they couldn't do anything better for themselves or their family or the people that they live with and work with and recreate with and things like that. So that would be my advice to a young person nowadays.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for sitting down with us today and having a chance to visit.
Well, thank you, Ann, for the opportunity to do it.
And thank you for tuning in, and look for other Front Porch Conversations coming soon.